we're on a tight deadline because Miss Wiki has an important customer meeting. So sorry, listeners, we're going to keep this one short and snappy for you.
Because we work really hard. We
We
work
do.
hard for the money.
We do.
Yeah, so hard for the money. Don't cut that one, Nick. Any-
Welcome back to the Capability Corner. This is the podcast where we explore what's happening in healthcare, workforce development, and capability building. My name is Zoe Yule, fresh with my new job title of Head of Learning and Capability at Ausmed. But more importantly, I am joined by the brilliant Michelle Wiki, Chief
I was
Customer
wondering if that was
Officer,
going to be
and
Kaz
Dr.
first.
Karen Patterson. Our wonderful, because you're now not inaugural anymore. You've been here long enough, but you're still wonderful. Our
wanted to say
Chief
the word
Nursing
anyway.
Officer. Welcome. Last episode before
Yay!
Recharge Week. Woo
Oh,
woo.
so good. So
Kick
good. I
us
love a
off.
good
What's
recharge.
Recharge Week, Michelle? And why do we love and need it? And why we wish it could be starting from tomorrow instead.
know.
We've got to wait another
Well,
2.5 weeks.
We saw a couple of this is my version, right? We saw a few American SaaSes, which is us. So software as a service. That's something new I learned. Anyway, not now. I learned that when I started at Ausmed. I've known that now. Anyway, and what they tend to do is they have a little break in the middle of the year. I think they probably do it because it's summer over there. But anyway, the point is the CEO was like, oh, let's look at all the metrics. Let's look at the business efficiency. Let's look at productivity, and found that actually we all start flagging around about September, October. So what is one method to do that? It was give us some days off and let us recharge in the middle of the year so we can get through the second half of the year. Anyway, so we all get a little week off. Some of the customers freak out, but it's okay because there's a little secret, what are they? Little leprechauns, and they watch the ticketing and make sure that the customers that really need the help in that week still get the help. Good on those leprechauns. So we all have a little break. Anyway, we're 2.5 weeks off that break. We're all chomping at the bit for our recharge week just to have some time out.
It's like synchronous time off in the middle of the year, which, I'm in Melbourne. You two are probably up in 28-degree weather in Sydney right now, but it's cold, it's dark, everyone gets sick, kids are getting tired, and we all just have a break and we feel good again. How are you, Karen?
I'm
You're
very
back
well.
from Bali. You had your beautiful recharge.
I did have my recharge. I was very lucky indeed. A beautiful wedding, and also then a week with my girlfriend for celebrating her birthday, where we just chilled, and it was fantastic. So I must admit. And the recharge week is just from working in healthcare for an awful long time. Never had the experience of a recharge week. So coming to work with Ausmed and the whole concept of everyone having the opportunity to have the 1 week off together, and knowing that, because, the lived experience of having to come back to a million emails and a list of things because everything keeps moving. So I just think it's a great concept, and love it. Look forward to my first experience.
Right. I'm going to introduce to today's topic, but we were supposed to be talking about the new standards and the new Aged Care Act that was meant to go live next week on July 1, but in true fashion, it's delayed again.
True fashion?
True fashion. Well, it's delayed once, so if it's delayed twice, can you say in true fashion? There's a lot that goes with that. I'm on the I wish it wasn't delayed camp, because I think everyone, especially large providers, have been working very, very hard to get ready. And there's a lot of costs. We were just talking about that, weren't we, Michelle? The fiscal cost involved in a second delay. It's a lot.
The notice period was so late. You're 3 weeks away from going live. You've already made learning decisions. You've paid for time. You've made home care changes. You've adjusted your packages, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's all, it's rough. And one minute you say, well, I know they've got to get it right. And then the other minute you say, couldn't you made that call a bit earlier? Like num-tums. That's what we say in our house. A load of num-tums.
Thoughts, Karen, Queen of Capability?
Oh, no, I was just thinking, I suppose from a transition perspective, one of the things is about moving towards an outcome focus, and regardless of the start date, the move should be happening. from there. So it is a bit about being a bit paternalistic. Are we actually changing the way we do things, or are we waiting to be told to change? And so if you come from a strategy perspective within that, it is about how have we got a transition strategy that is building our responsiveness and our ability, or are we still stuck in wanting to lead something that has been written on a piece of paper? So I get it. I get the tension within that, and that people have made investments. But if we think that that investment is actually already going to be delivering returns for them, how do we start to think differently about that from a strategy perspective?
It's like you knew the topic of today's conversation, what we've had to pivot to, Karen. Thanks for that beautiful segue because you mentioned the word strategy, and I'm gonna take and run that one because when we were discussing, well, what would we talk about this week? If we can't really talk about quality standards, although I am genuinely looking forward to that conversation when our episode on quality standards. It's going to be November 1 episode. Stay tuned for that. But I've still got my job, so that's great. That means that I've done change okay. I'm still here. If the listeners are following along, they'll remember that the last episode we did was around change. The change that I've began to implement in my new team is gone. It's gone really well, and I've got to say why I'm choosing to talk about strategy here is because and I know this is going to sound like it's all business speak, but I genuinely mean this when I say I think, as part of this change, I've written a new strategy for our content team, or the content function of Ausmed, and more broadly, and it has been a great tool, a great enabler to support change. And I think people will have heard, it's just a strategy changing, and might trigger a few responses in people, but I've had a really positive experience with it. I've enjoyed trying to articulate what the current state is versus the future state and thinking about how we get there. And I thought it would be a useful conversation. I'm actually sitting in the CEO's office because it's the only quiet room at Ausmed. And it's something often executives are responsible for, but it's been a really great activity. Is something that I've been able to drive. So I wanted to bring strategy to the brains trust today, and talk about why it matters. It is a corporate buzzword, but I feel it's been an enabler. It's helped balance that emotional or the feelings that we try and move through when it comes to change, but be a rational tool. And when I asked my team, what are your thoughts around change? What are your instincts? It was, yeah, I do like change. I'm not quite on the Michelle Wiki end of the spectrum, but I like change, but I do like to know the reasons behind it. I like to know the rationale. So that's perhaps why, the strategy has been a great enabler. Shifting to our conversation around, strategy within workforce capability. Let's open up, what does it take to create a strategy? And what are your experiences around it?
Living in the world of health, strategy pops up all the time. And because I have had the opportunity to both be an executive in the development of strategy, but also as a facilitator of strategy. And so I have a lot of passion and interest in the space. And I think it's also just a way of thinking. So that's the part which is around the process and also the cognitive processes, so the paper processes and the thinking processes. But to me, I feel it's like, I use lots of metaphors, but the parts which is around a bit of a bridge between your intent and your outcomes from there, because the strategy is about clarity. So the best strategies are the ones that are the clearest and the easiest to understand. And then I suppose what parts from that is that it's clear to say within that strategy what we are going to focus on, so that will allow us to achieve our intent. And then it's about how do we ensure we have the capability to be able to deliver on that intent and make that intent, into real outcomes from there. So capability definitely sits in the center of strategy, because if you're building a strategy and you don't have the intent to invest in that capability to deliver on it, you're really, just painting a picture that you can just hang on the wall. It's not a future view.
No, I think you make some really good points, Karen, around, where capability sits inside strategy and how strategy works. I think for me, I do love a good strategy because I do think when it's done well, it paints the picture in lots of different methods or platforms or ways for people to see where things are going or where things are heading. So often you see in a strategy document the diagrams, but then you also have the words, and then you also have the numbers, and all those, let's say those three areas will probably speak to the majority of people that the strategy needs to communicate to. And I think that's really helpful because you then do have this, working platform to come from about where you want to go and where you're all heading. I think my frustration is when you see executives sit behind their closed doors and create a strategy from their little brains. I should say little brains, but don't cut that, Nick. It's fine as well. I'm happy to own it. When you see them create strategy in their offices with their doors closed and then just come out and communicate it, that can be quite frustrating. But more so when it's a point in time, like literally the strategy is made in this one moment and then you never come back to it as an organization or as a group or as a team. You don't bounce back to it. So that is one of the things I find quite frustrating. I think that's when strategy is done poorly. It's when it's created without collaboration and when it's never returned to or just compartmentalized in that moment of initial communication and not taken any further.
I think that is definitely when it's done poorly. I think it's also done poorly when it's very much reactionary and yet when it's done well is when it actually sums up the story and it talks to what people's experiences are and it helps remedy some of the challenges, the threats that they're experiencing. Tell me, what's your experience been with Michelle? As a leader, when have you rolled out a strategy? So you're talking from your perspectives and experience, I guess, within an organisation. Have you rolled out a strategy in previous roles? How have you done it well? Someone that loves change, I'm guessing that you're also great with, rethinking what strategy we need and just running with it.
I think I'm probably pretty rubbish at it, really. I just like it so much that then I don't put it on paper and I just run with the strategy in my own head and decide this is where we're going now. But look, when I've seen it done well, it's when we always come back to it. I'll tell you one little secret. What I really enjoy is when certain CEOs have come to me in the past and said, oh, what about this idea, Michelle? Or what about that idea? Or let's do this. And then I have the pleasure of saying, that's a great idea. How does it speak to the strategy at the moment? Because, really, shouldn't our efficiencies and productivity be continually linking back to the strategy? If the strategy is right, it'll be getting us to our business goals. So we should always be pulling back to the strategy. So I do enjoy that quite a bit, just realigning the people that should be leading from strategy to the fact that they're not leading from strategy and now they should do it. So I think, to reverse engineer that, I think it's done really well when leadership, especially the authors of strategy, are always going back to strategy and communicating, this is why we're doing this because it lines up with this and this is where we're taking it. And I think it's also a really easy, well, maybe not easy, but it's an easier way to also say no to some things.
Absolutely.
Without it getting
That's what
personal.
Michael Porter talks about,
Oh, there you go. I didn't even read Michael Porter.
Thought leaders in business. Michael Porter, business professor at Harvard, says, the real enabler that strategy is a way to say no. And, it's not so much about what you're doing, but it's what you're not doing. And I've had that this week. There's been something in one of my teams that I just have not seen how it gels with the strategy. And, it's not a person thing, but it's actually saying, hey, how does this work with the strategy? I don't know if it fits in. I think it fits in with someone else's team strategy. Let's have a chat about that instead. So you're right. It's a tool for not just saying yes, but saying no.
But I think it's a good way to not get personal, like not getting offensive. It's not, no, your idea is stupid. Even if it is stupid, you get to kind of say no. I love where you're thinking with that, but right now that doesn't really suit our strategy, so that's not going to work right now.
I liked what you were saying before about having sort of, when you've looked at different strategies or been part of them, that they've had lots of methods or ways to do things, etc. from there. So one of the things from my experience that I found works well with people as far as getting that engagement with the strategy, and as I said, so it actually becomes part of their narrative rather than my narrative from there. It's a collective. Is and I know we've talked before about sort of the tight, loose, tight concept from there, and I think the application of that in this is around being really tight around the why. So why is this important to us? How does this represent our purpose and who we are and what we stand for as, an organization, and then a team within an organization, so that we can actually see ourselves within that. And then the loose part from there is more around the how we go about it. So, and this is where that trust comes in within a strategy. For a strategy to be effective, it needs to be integrated and have that trust within it. But the loose is around, how you go about it. As long as it's aligned with the strategy, we're not going to tell you this is what you have to do. It's what would you want to do? This comes back to your change principles of Cotter's, Zoe. And then the other tight part from there is then about accountability. So if you have purpose as tight and accountability, and the accountability is about, so the purpose is about what matters, and the accountability is about measuring what matters. So how do we know that we're delivering the outcomes that we set out to do? How we get there, we have the organisational trust to say that we're all going in the same direction and we believe it's aligned with our values and who we are. And so that's what I've found has been the most effective way. And it's actually not even mentioning the word strategy. It's about purpose.
I didn't realise we talked about tight, loose, tight. I thought that was like a fashion theory where if it's tight on the bust, you go loose around the waist and then tight on the thighs. Or if you're tight on the waist, then you're loose on the thighs and tight around the ankles. But this is new to me, Kaz. So I don't know if we have talked about it in another podcast and I wasn't listening, but I'm loving it. I'm loving to apply it to something other than fashion. So that's good.
Well, I haven't thought about it in fashion.
I can jump in here and connect a dot, because it was you and I, Karen, that were talking about this. Michelle's got a bit of FOMO. She
No FOMO. Just was like, I know I don't pay a lot of attention to people, but I didn't realise it was that bad.
But you said the same thing. That's what I was saying, Michelle. What you said is actually
without
even knowing it. I said
when I listen, that's what I hear, and that's the other part about talking to people and engaging with a strategy, is that you would engage with them in a way that they would hear what's actually happening, which may be that you're reinterpreting the words of the strategy. So it's not actually about talking strategy. It's about that leadership, or being authentic, and you're being accountable and putting a real
just so
thread.
Complimentary, Kaz. So complimentary.
Your middle name is authentic, though,
it.
Michelle. But coming back to the loose type, I think it's almost like the thinking fast, thinking slow analogy as well. And I think what we were talking about it was actually in the context of the governance framework, Karen, and specifically around AI, and what were the things, yes, within the strategy as well, but what are the things that can go quick and that maybe sit within that they don't need to be as tight, but then what are the things that you actually have to stop and go slow with, and pause and make sure that the really good trusted frameworks are in place. That was my recollection of our conversation, but I might have it totally wrong. Do you want to set the score right on what the loose tight analogy is?
No, it's still there. Like it's tight.
It works.
That's it's regardless. It can be applied in lots of, because it is around purpose, how you go, the why, how, what, which is Simon Sinek's around the golden circle from there, and how to work with strategy, and a lot of the large organisations. The thing is around what's important to them is, in that why part is the most important part of the strategy, and getting that clarity. And as Michelle said, it needs to have everyone's voices in it. And it's not about doing behind a closed door or on a sticky note somewhere.
Absolutely.
It actually has to be for everybody.
I agree. Look, my lived and recent experience of that is absolutely the case. What I've tried to say is I am, as a leader, standing on the back of a horse, waving the flag, saying we've got to go there. That's the vision.
On a horse.
Yeah, I know. I have done bareback
The art of war.
Yeah, analogy being it is about being that visionary leader. But then there are so many details. There are so many things that we all need to think about. That's where everyone comes in. Everyone come in and let's figure this out. Let's go there together. But on the engagement piece, something that I think worked really well over the past few weeks with this strategy was working with my team leaders and managers within the department and asking them to do a SWOT analysis. And the goal of that was to say, what are the strengths that we all have? I identify them. You've got them. Let's maximize those. But there are challenges. There's threats. There's risk of burnout. There's processes that aren't working. And let's use the strategy as a way to say, well, how do we overcome those? So I think that from an engagement piece, it was really important. And when I've presented that to the team, I've been really deliberate in saying, you've shaped this strategy. It's directly the insights, your contributions have directly impacted on this strategy. But I've really tried to hone in on the why. I am a storyteller. I want to communicate the rationale, the background, the context, why we're talking about this, and really say, this is not a reflection of past people or past failures or anything like that. This is very much a reflection of where we want to go together. And I think that's resonated. It's looking at what are the systems that might need some tweaks. How do we support the team to move forward, and sort of using the strategy as an objective tool to help us get there. Do you think we're getting better at strategy? We've got proliferation of information and education everywhere, but are we actually doing this better than what we did 20 years ago?
I'm just going to say I think that we probably lean too much into strategy in a scheme, and that when you're saying the vision of sitting on the horse from there, because I just go back to where strategy came from, which was Napoleon. It was war, taking things from other people, and how do you do that? So I think it is a really interesting time for us to be thinking where we are. How do we actually be more responsive? How do we recognize from a pace of change that we need to actually have multiple scenarios as possibilities? That is less about the control of strategy, which was about, I'm going to make everybody walk this way, wearing this outfit, doing these things, to get the best out of my people, like you were saying, identifying what they saw as the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. If I engage them, and I engage them in a truly authentic way, giving them permission, I'm going to have multiple scenarios as to work with, as well as holding the purpose and the vision. So it is actually quite complex from there. And I think strategy sometimes simplifies it. And as you're saying, we can have that because it's there, and it gives people confidence. But then it's about, if you're working with people in the messiness and the complexity, and then engaging people, I think there's a new language that will emerge, and the AI will be part of that. I think thinking around capability and thinking around how we have the right capability to enable us to deliver on the directions we're going, or the scenarios that we're projecting. From there, we have to have that combination of the human and the technical to get there, to be able to deliver against, and recognizing what's the best of both, and how can we use those and tap into those to achieve our goal.
100%. I think you always have such wise words of wisdom, Karen. I just want to pick up on a couple of things. One, I love the way that you're phrasing like situations or scenarios. Strategy perhaps has some of those negative connotations, but thinking about it like we are just thinking about what are the current situations and maybe some scenarios that come up in the future, and how we want to look at them. But you also mentioned AI. Any strategy or scenario, whatever planning tool you're using in healthcare or any sector, obviously from now on needs to include AI. I've thought about it. One, in how do we augment workflows in a way that people feel safe and psychologically kind of comfortable with using, to free up time to then be able to capitalize on the defensibility aspects of our strategy that make our content exceptional, against AI, but against all the other factors that a business needs to plan on. So yeah, I've thought about it as a capability enabler, in that psychologically safe way. But then, how does this strategy be defensible against AI? That's my 2 cents. But I'm going to hand over to the pure, unfiltered rant that is what's grinding Michelle gears.
Oh,
That
what
is
is me
what's
grinding Michelle
grinding
gears?
Michelle's gears this week.
I mean, let's just be honest. This is not 100% unfiltered. I filter everything I say all the time. Even when they say I'm allowed to be filtered, there's definitely filtering going on.
And
But
that, our
pushing
friends, is the scary thing.
exactly, exactly. But no, I'm going to circle back. I'm going to triangulate with what I said about building strategy. So I think what really frustrates me, and also bouncing back off what you've said, Zoe, is you've set a strategy, you've worked together, you've collaborated, you've involved all these pieces, and that's all great. But what happens next? What really pisses me off is when these strategy makers do maybe even do all the right things to get to, hey, here's our strategy. And then, like a dying business plan of a sole trader, they put it back in the drawer and never go back to it. The fact that we need to continually circle to the strategy, continually speak to it, continually say, is this where we're going to get? Is this how we're going to get to where we want to get to? This is the path we should be going on. And are we going on that path? So the revisits, the circling back, the talking the talk, having the narrative the same, or continuously, and then calling out, actually, the strategy needs to change. So now we're pivoting and we're going to do it in a transparent, spoken about way, I think is really essential as well. So what pisses me off is when you do a great strategy and then you do nothing with it, or it goes in the drawer and you don't talk about it again. So call to action, Zoe. In the calendar, give yourself some reminders in a month's time. Have I raised
Talk
this at
about
the team
strategy.
meeting?
Talk about
Have I
strategy.
looped back to the strategy? Have I told them how they're doing a good job because it aligns with the strategy? Continue that
Yeah.
conversation.
Great
Because if you
words.
believe truly in the strategy, then where it's telling you it'll take you is where it'll get to, only if you keep to those strategy moves. And that's
Love
it
it.
for me.
Love it. I plan on continuing to talk about the strategy. You can remind me in this podcast if you like. I think one of the things I'm also mindful of is that there's so much so much of a role that education, support, facilitation can play in that. And that's why we've got Karen, honorary member of our team, that's for sure, within the content team over the next couple of months, supporting with rolling out a few key pieces of that strategy in the form of workshops and enabling people to continue to get together. I think what people love about doing strategy is they get a chance to stop doing what they do every single day and have a day where they chat, they connect, and they think about, working on the business, not so much in the business. So I think, just enabling people with those opportunities is great. Karen, any final words from you or thoughts on Michelle's rant?
No, I think I really enjoyed the rant. I was just thinking, Michelle, that doesn't sound ranty. I actually like it's very positive
I can rant truth.
You can rant truth. So no, but I'm just my mind was going back to where we started around the aged care and strategy, and I think the tools that we use and how do we that adaptability, as you're saying there, Michelle, and we get bound by saying, well, this strategy is the 2020 to 2026 strategy, so we've got to keep going, guys. Come on. Rather than saying, well, hang on, like all the feedback, all the signals we're getting is we've got to pivot and we've got to pivot now. That's our strategy, is to deliver the outcomes. If we're saying, okay, our purpose and outcomes are there, how we go about it's got to change.
Absolutely.
And that's then about what we invest in, because that's those choices about what we do and we don't do. And at the time, some of the best things weren't appropriate. But when things change, it may be that, the weighting changes within that. So I really
Definitely.
agree with that
My
rant, Michelle.
takeaway is, as much as I love a slow cooked 12-hour roast lamb, strategy is not a set and forget. It's active. It's got to be involved in the DNA of the team every single day. And with the rate of change, it's obvious, anyone doing a 5 or 6 year strategy, they're bonkers. Like, max 1 year as a formal document. You need to come back to this at much quicker intervals. So Before we wrap up, let's take a quick look at what's coming up in the Ausmed world. Karen's talking about strategy pivoting. We have pivoted. We were meant to have our last webinar on July 1 next week to help providers working in aged care and home care support with how do you report on the new standards. But we've pivoted. So the topic is everything that you've been asking about the new standards. And we've obviously adapted given the standards were delayed. So we're doing a Q&A for that session. Make sure you check it out. It's a bit of an open forum of sorts. Anything that you'd like us to cover, now's your chance. So we'll try and address as many questions as we can in that webinar. We had a great time at Aged Care Week last week, Michelle. Thanks for everyone that's connected with us. What else is on the radar? Anything else coming up this week? We've got a leadership day down in Melbourne.
Sydney ACPA is
Sydney
on this
ACPA.
week. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. Gonna go schmooze.
That'll be fun.
Say hello
Come
to
and
a few
say
people.
hello.
Yeah.
We love thinking about what we can talk about and offer, what activities we do at the booth. So come join us. And we'll see you down in Melbourne next week, Karen. We'd love to hear from you. Got any thoughts on today's episode, a hot take or a topic you want to cover, any burning questions, email us at podcast@ausmed.com.au. Follow us on LinkedIn for more insights and updates, and make sure you subscribe to the Ausmed Toolbox for much more eloquently detailed analyses of topics relating to capability. But thanks, Michelle and Karen, for joining us for another sensational episode of the Capability Corner.
Always a pleasure.
Love it.
Bye.